I was on target was right after the CIA was invaded by a naval unit. There was an incredible aircraft, which I tried to describe it at the time. This wasn't like any aircraft I've ever seen. And it flew very low over my neighborhood. And I saw it. And I realized that these people were showing me that the U.S. military is not, they're not following the instructions of the crooked brass. They're doing their jobs in the United States, and they're waiting for people to catch on. And it's not just the United States, it's all of the military powers in the world. They know that the brass is corrupt, but they also know that we understand that the corruption will end and that they will help us all working together. It's actually very exciting. And one of the things that I just tweeted recently, and what happens frequently, is that I tweet these things and then somebody takes down the links. They don't want people to know what's really going on. So one of the things that I tweeted was the fact that the military helicopters are buzzing my house just about every day. It doesn't, you know, they'll be flying very low and I'll hear the copters. I don't know what the neighbors are thinking, why the helicopters are always flying over my house very low, but that's what happens because people are, they're showing that that the reality is a lot different and that we're actually much stronger than the banking cartel, much stronger. And the banking cartel, every time I do something and I know that I'm being thwarted, because you can't explain why these things happen. Why was I thrown down suddenly yesterday? I think because people didn't want me to do the video. Well, that's not going to intimidate me. And the reason why not is because we really have no choice. We either are going to get rid of this corruption or we're going to have World War III. And one of the things that I mentioned, you can see that in the paperwork where I was briefing you for this video. You can see that there's a gas pipeline that's it's directed by Russia, and it goes from Iraq, from Iran to Iraq. And then there's one which the United States is financing, and that goes from Qatar to Turkey. These, and that's what the black nobility does, actually. They create all of these conflicts in all kinds of ways. It's called divide and conquer. As soon as we understand what's really going on and who's really benefiting from these fights, the fights disappear. But many people get so caught up with the fights that they don't really, they stay fighting. And one of the big fights that people continue to be distracted with is what's happened in the Middle East. And there was a very good Canadian reporter who started telling people about what the history of Israel was and Zionism was, and how that was actually, it turned out that the Germans were there creating the state of Israel because they thought that was the thing to do. They were the original Zionists. And if you look at what happened with Hiroshima, Hiroshima was not really, we say that it was the United States that bombed Hiroshima, but that's not actually what happened. What happened was there was a uranium enrichment plant, and the German submarines were captured, and then the United States used the enriched uranium and also the trigger devices to drop the bombs on Japan. But it was German scientists that were involved, actually. And what was going on with the concentration camps, those were slave labor who were enriching the uranium. That was what was going on in those camps. And then when the Russians came back at the end of World War II, they took, they reconstructed the gas chambers. There were no gas chambers killing Jews during the World War II. It was, and people know this, many people know this. And so when you understand how complex the history is, when this Canadian reporter understood how complex things were and reported this, he was murdered. He was murdered. So these corrupt people like to intimidate people and silence them. And you can see that what I'm telling you, what I tell you, it gets silenced all the time. Somebody was telling me on Facebook that the links don't work there anymore. Well, it's a double-edged sword. When people realize that there's all this censorship, they have to figure out what are people trying to hide. And last night when I was thrown to the ground, and believe me, I was thrown to the ground. I know when I'm thrown, and that's what happened. I was thrown to the ground. And it actually hurt pretty badly. It was a pretty nasty fall. But I realized that I don't want to be involved in World War III, and I've got to do my part to fight this corruption. Now, let me explain about what happened at the World Bank so that you understand my role. The World Bank had all of the assets of the world deposited in it, and Ferdinand Marcos was the lawyer, and Jose Rizal was the one who had the wealth of the world. He melted down the gold in, I believe it was in Singapore, and stamped it, and then he buried it underground. And then he put video cameras there so that people would know whether it was safe or whether it was being sold. And there were some threats. Germany actually tried to get its gold inventoried, and the United States wouldn't do that. Why is that? That's because Fort Worth doesn't have any gold in it. And some of the people were faking whether or not there was an audit of gold. There has never been an audit of gold because the gold is, as I mentioned to you, it's buried. It's buried in these caves which have the video cameras on them. And anyway, so I was telling you how I've been involved in this. So I started out actually wanting to get to the bottom of what I knew was the way that lawyers are supposed to fight corruption. And that was, I was working as an insider with the audit committee of the board and with some of the people who understood what's supposed to happen. And as I said, we had a meeting with Jim Wolfenson, and Jim Wolfenson, he lied. There was no two ways about it. He lied. And so I wasn't going to back off. And I didn't back off. And then one of the things that I found out many years later was that, that the gold and other wealth of the world was deposited with the World Bank. And there's also something that was deposited in the World Bank, which was, it's called Treaty of Versailles bonds. that was issued between World War I and World War II. The elites gave up their gold because they were afraid it was going to be stolen, and they got bonds from the Treasury Department, from the Federal Reserve. And these bonds have continued to earn interest, and the interest has been compounded. And at this point, these bonds are worth over $2 quadrillion. And I've been doing what you're supposed to do as a lawyer who represents the board. I'm sorry, let me just tell you, I had forgotten the name of the Russian who was talking about the World Bank. His name was Katasanov, and he's the one who said that when the World Bank was created, they took all the history of what had actually happened in World War II and the role that the bankers had played, and they erased it. And but in the meantime, the people in the World Bank understood that the role of the World Bank was to fight the corruption. And the way that that Ferdinand Marcos and Jose Rizal did this was they didn't want people to fight over the gold. So they used something called the statute of limitations, which is if you haven't succeeded in proving your claim that you own something after 50 years, that claim, it no longer is valid. And so what I've been doing is I've been writing to many, many people who said that they were the ones that owned the gold and that they were entitled to it. And I've said to them, your claim is barred by the statute of limitations. And I've gotten to the point where I just don't waste my time with the correspondence. I just write one letter. You've got no way to prove this because it's stale. Your claim is stale. So what's actually happened now is that I've been learning my job. And what I did with the Treaty of Versailles bonds that are worth $2 quadrillion, or actually more, is I filed liens against them. As a lawyer, you know that's what you do. And so those liens benefit all of humanity. What happened, I guess it was a week ago, was somebody wrote me a letter, and I've got their name in the outline. She was from Puerto Rico, and she wrote me a letter, and she said, could you please deposit some of the wealth that belongs to the people in the world into my bank account? So I said to her, look, this wealth belongs to everybody, and we've got to fight the corruption, or it's just going to be dissipated. And so, no, I'm not going to be in a position to put any money in your bank account. That's not how it's going to be dispersed. And I copied everybody so they could see that. And one of the other documents that I've recently put up in the social media has to do with the Situation Room. Because remember, I think it was in January, there were a number of people who sat in the Situation Room and decided whether or not we should begin with World War III. And so what I did was most of these people, I've already put commercial liens on them. What is a commercial lien? A commercial lien is something which is valid under the common law. I don't want to bore you about the intricacies of common law and admiralty law. But what I have been saying all along is that the lawyers, first of all, they don't understand the difference between the common law and the admiralty law. And they don't understand that, well, the first thing they don't understand is they don't understand that the Constitution of the United States went out of effect in 1871. And that was Benjamin Franklin. He became the Postmaster General, and he had a meeting, and he negotiated the war debts from the Revolutionary War, and they fell due in 1871. And so that's when the bankers put a second secret constitution in place. And all of the constitutions in every single country have been replaced. So there's no real legitimate government in any single country. They're all just caught up with this corruption. And it's something which is very hard to accept, actually, because so many people will accept this as true, but it isn't true. It's a lie. And yeah, I'm just a person who once I understand what something is, I'm not going to be intimidated. And I don't want to bore you with it, but I was having a conversation with my mother because she understands what my role is, and she every now and then wants me to just give it up because it's been pretty heavy, especially when I was in the hospital being poisoned by arsenic. So I said to my mother, look, you've always known me to be doing things my own way. Even as a small child, I wouldn't follow your instructions. Once when I was in elementary school, there was a snow day, and I happened to be there with some other children, and the principal showed up, and I was running the school. That's just, that's just my characteristic. I'm not a shrinking violet, so you've seen. Anyway, I've been speaking now in a rather disjointed fashion, and I don't want to go on at great length anymore. What I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap up this video, and then I'm going to show, and I'm going to try to put that up on the internet, on YouTube very soon. And then I'm going to tape a second video, and I'll put that up a couple of weeks later. And the reason why I want to do that is because I want people to respond in the comment section and to see where we are. Now, there'll be some of these comments that are what we call sock puppets, and I'll respond to them, but many people are going to see where we are. And it's very useful, actually. So I don't want to just have one comment section. I want to have two comment sections. So I'll make a second video where we'll have a second comment section. So I want to thank you for listening, and I'll be in touch in a short while. Thank you.